Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to this very, very first episode of this very, very special show. This is Untold Radio AM. This is unlike anything that you have ever heard in your life. Sit back, relax. Let's go for a ride together. Before we begin this journey, I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. But with me is Mr. Doug Hajicek. Doug Hajicek is a legend in television. Doug Hajicek is the man that captured a monster, a giant squid. And I am honored to have him as my co-host. Doug, thank you so much for giving me this pleasure to broadcast with you.
Hello, Joel. Thank you. This is number 1, episode 1.
This is the first one ever. We promise to entertain, inform, and sometimes educate as well as we can. But we're learning right along with you guys.
Which is why I really want to do this, because I have this thirst to learn, to meet people.
I do as well, Doug. Definitely. And that is no different tonight. We have a special guest on the show. The bottom of the hour, which if you're sitting in Central Time, that's 7:30. Eastern Time, 8:30. We have David Paulides coming on the show. And he is the man behind Missing 411. He is the man that has been tracking strange disappearances in the wilderness for several years now and has some interesting theories. You're going to want to hang around and hear what David has to say. It is going to be truly eye-opening. But that being said, we have a lot of stuff to get to tonight. Doug, tell us about yourself a little bit. People that may not have heard of you.
That's a tough one. Back in 1985, I started an outdoor show with Ron Shera. Did that for about 8 years. And that got me really, it gave me a chance to meet a lot of outdoor people, wilderness people, do wildlife research. And from there, I went to work for Animal Planet, doing The Man That Walks with Bears. So I ended up continuing bear research, doing hidden cameras in bear dens and beaver lodges. And, I was really interested in the world that we couldn't see. I built the Benthic Explorer. And that was for Discovery 2. And it was the first time an underwater camera had been put at the bottom of Lake Superior. First live camera ever. And it was more than just a camera. It was more of a research platform. We had SAIS meters, hyperspectral lighting. We had microscopic cameras. We had 360 cameras. We had a fish feeding system. And we had a system where we could basically measure the intelligence of fish. And this went on for quite a while until a big storm took it out. And from there, I just continued on with wildlife research until one day I was up in the Arctic. And we were looking for giant lake trout that were over 100 pounds. And I was up there with a biologist and a small team of people and came upon Bigfoot footprints that came out of the water, walked up the shore, walked into some pea gravel, then into the tundra, and then to a small stand of stunted black spruce trees. And there was a footprint, Joel, in front of the trunk and one footprint behind the trunk.
I mean, just think about how big that creature would have to be to step over that tree.
It walked over it like a weed.
Oh, my good Lord.
That was a life-changing moment. It really was. And so I came back from that trip just changing my thoughts. suddenly I was, I was okay with black bears and doing that kind of research, but I couldn't get these footprints. I knew they were real. We were, 500, 600, 800 miles from the nearest road. And so that was life changing. I then went on to become kind of a Bigfoot researcher, met people like Matt Moneymaker. And of course, he gave me a big education and said, oh, these things, they're everywhere, figuratively speaking. Did Legend Meets Science, did Mysterious Encounter series, then went on to do MonsterQuest. And that kind of sort of brings me to today.
And Doug, man, that is fascinating stuff, what you've done in your life. And and this isn't here to interview you because you're the co-host and we have interviewed you. And if you want to hear that interview, you can go to our other show, our sister show, which is After Hours AM. It's up for download. You can definitely hear Doug talk to us about his experiences. But I got to ask you, why radio? What brings you to this seat?
Well, the whole TV business is still fascinates me, and I still hope to maybe produce some more programming. But radio is something I've never done. To me, it seems very simple. From a standpoint, I don't have to fly anywhere. Mm-hmm. I don't have to go to a million different places to meet all these new people that we're about to meet. I can still let my curiosity roam. And now, of course, at my age, this seems like a dream to have a job like this. And so I'm really, really hoping that people listen. We get a lot of really amazing guests and we get a lot of real amazing info out there.
Now, me, myself, of course, this Jolsters. I don't know if me, myself is a correct word, or even if it really is a word, but I'll use that for a minute. I have been in the radio business since I was 16, well over 27, 30 years now. My gosh, every time I turn around, it's longer and longer. And I started off as just a lowly DJ, worked my way up. But along the way, I realized I had a big interest in strangeness. Not just strange, but high strangeness. Things like Bigfoot, ghosts, lake monsters, UFOs. That always fascinated me and intrigued me, so I carved out a niche for myself, broadcasting about the things that I love, which is the high strangeness. It still gets my curiosity piqued to this day. After interviewing thousands of people over the years, it just still keeps me asking why. That same question has not been answered quite yet. Why? Why is there an afterlife? Is there a Bigfoot? What's up with UFOs? Things like that. So that keeps us all going. A lot of us going that have an interest in what we're talking about. It keeps us all going because nobody quite has those answers yet. We're hoping with this series, this show, that we get just a little bit closer to those answers. Maybe fill in a few of those blanks along the way. And we appreciate each and every one of you that are listening. Now, Doug, earlier today we had talked about planning for the show. We did a pre-production meeting. And one thing we like to do, and that will be a staple on the show, is we like to talk about the news of the strange. Now, one of those stories really stuck out to Doug and I, and that is the Russian scientists trapped under ice. Trapped under ice in this giant lake. Now, not just trapped under ice. I shouldn't say trapped under ice. They were lost under ice, but they encountered a sea monster. A monster, Doug, in this dark lake in Russia.
Yeah, you think about it's called Lake Vostok. 6 miles of ice cover this subglacial lake. I mean, it's landlocked, but it's not. It's ice-locked. Mm-hmm. We don't know if there's caverns that go out to the ocean. We don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. They know nothing about Lake Vostok. And so when I read this story about these scientists that were killed, I have a little bit of skepticism. I don't know if it's true, but technically there's nothing in the story that wouldn't be feasible. There could be very well some very aggressive octopus or squid that could easily kill a human being. I mean, oh my God, a 6-foot Humboldt squid can tear apart a man.
Do they have an interest in doing so, though, the animals? Would they really care?
Humboldt squid are very, very dangerous. And yes, they seem to want to attack people. They're very, very aggressive. In fact, every time we've gone down and dived with them, everybody has to wear chainmail protection, including
almost as if you are
armor. Oh yeah.
Wow, prepping like for a shark attack almost.
Yeah. They're way worse than sharks because they have thousands of chitin hooks. They have suckers. They have a beak like a parrot that can chomp, chomp, chomp and take, a Humboldt squid can take softball-sized bites out of you. And we're talking about a 6-foot squid. So what they're talking about is, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet long. And so a squid like that could do some serious damage.
It would. Now, this is the story coming in. This one comes from Rumble. This is the website reporting this. A defecting Russian scientist has surfaced with a mind-bending account of what really occurred when he and his colleagues went missing for 5 days in a mysterious lake 12,366 feet beneath the Arctic ice. Dr. Anton Paltalka, I'm going to try not to destroy it, it's a very thick Russian name, told authorities in Switzerland that the researchers discovered a bizarre and deadly life form dubbed organism 46-B, a highly intelligent octopus-like creature that claimed the lives of 3 of the team members. Doesn't that just sound like something right out of a movie?
It does. It does. But, everything I read is plausible.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody crazy enough to go down 6 kilometers below the ice? Think of the little hole that you're now being lowered into. Now you're going to dive below it. And God
knows. It makes you wonder, Doug, if they had a choice. You go into water.
Or ever send anybody I know down there. I mean, that's really crazy.
That is crazy. Like I said, maybe they didn't have a choice.
That's possible.
You're going whether you like it or whether you don't. You're going in.
Different government system.
But looking up Lake Vostok, there's not they know a little bit about it. But even the Wikipedia page is very short.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not much information.
Not a ton. They do say it's very, obviously very deep, secluded, not a place that you'd want to be spending any kind of vacation time. You may not catch a tan there. It might not be the greatest joint.
Yeah,
say water sports.
One of the things, Joel, I was looking for is this brackish water? What is the salinity of the water? Is it pure salt water? Is it heavier salt water? Couldn't find any information in the brief time I had today to look. But guaranteed at this point, I'm going to be a little more interested.
Yeah, because it doesn't really discuss the composition of the water at all.
No.
Even in all the paperwork I was digging up, nothing really speaking of whether it's fresh water or salt water or what's going on with it. Or even, obviously there's something feeding this lake. So you very well could be right on the money. There could be underwater caverns that are allowing life to come in from the surrounding oceans. I guess we got to
the actual lake. The actual lake itself is called a lake, but to me, it's an ocean that's frozen over. It's been cut off from the ocean. But you think about these creatures that would be down there, they're all going to be blind, Joel. They're not going to have eyes. They're not going to be able to see, not in the way we do. But one unique thing about octopus and squid is they can produce light. And so there's a good chance that this thing produces light. Once again, there was not a lot of detail in the article.
Yeah, I wish that they would flesh it out a little bit, but we will keep our eyes and ears open for more coming if this does prove to be a true story. More information as we get it. We will share it with you guys as soon as we get it. So maybe we can figure out what the heck's going on over there in Russia, and hopefully that there is more, and hopefully there's a new discovery. That would be really cool. A new discovery of animal out there or aquatic life. that would blow everyone's
Absolutely.
socks off. So, what are you doing? Now, Doug, I got to ask you, what do you think about time travel?
Gee, every time I think about it, my head explodes. I always think about the paradoxes.
Yeah.
You can go back in time and
Butterfly
pretty much end the
effect,
world.
the DeLorean, the 88 miles an hour, the flux capacitor. We think about all that
The
stuff.
actual paradox is interesting. And we saw an article today where a student apparently has proved that time travel is possible and that the paradoxes can even be avoided all through math. And it was peer reviewed.
Yeah, but see now that just because you can step on the butterfly now doesn't mean you should. But, I'm just saying, little changes like, okay, if you go back in time to, let's just say, assassinate Hitler before his atrocities started, what would make you in the future want to go back at all? Because that would change everything. It really wouldn't work at all. Because here you are now with that situation of nothing compelling you to go.
Have you ever thought about, Joel, every time you do something, how you're changing the future? Just one little decision. You may make a decision, I'm going to stop at Jimmy John's and get a sandwich. And it could change the future of thousands of people.
Gee, I hope not. God, that's a lot of weight to put on my shoulders now, Doug. Thousands of people.
Well, I can think of examples in my life where I've met somebody, and it has had huge effects.
Mm-hmm. Are you a believer in synchronicities, though? Like everything happens for a reason. There's a reason for that happening. So do we really change anything, or is it a path that we're on?
Kind of my beliefs are more that maybe we get help if we're already on a path. That maybe two people are meant to meet to accomplish something. But it doesn't mean I necessarily believe it's been written and it's in stone to happen that way. I do believe in that. Yes, you can just kind of fork off. You can decide to go to that restaurant and not get in that car accident.
True, because what you're saying, though, in a roundabout way, is it kind of throws free will out the window.
Right.
If no matter what we're doing, we're going on that same path, where's the free will? Right? And so everything that we do has a repercussion to it, whether it's stopping at Jimmy John's or stepping on a butterfly. There's a change somehow, no matter how minute, with each decision.
Yeah, I mean, think back in your own life, your decision when you met your wife. Somehow
best decision ever made.
You ran into her, you met, and now you've got children.
Yeah.
And those children are going to have children, and so on and so forth. And so there was kind of a moment you could look back on that for sure you changed people's lives.
Well, what's interesting, you're absolutely correct. But what's interesting is the individual that wrote the paper says, say you traveled in time to attempt to stop COVID-19. Patient 0 from ever being exposed to the virus. However, if you stop that individual from becoming infected, that would eliminate the motivation for you to go back in the first place to stop it. The pandemic, in the first place, stop that pandemic because it never existed anyway. So it's like the chicken and the egg kind of thing, right?
Yeah, something I would call the double paradox, because even thinking about it's a paradox.
Yeah.
You can just keep throwing a paradox after paradox after paradox, and eventually your head just explodes.
But the $64,000 question is, would you time travel? Doug, if somebody came to you and said, we have a machine, we could send you any time period you want to go, would you go?
Yes, because I'd have $20 riding on it that it wouldn't work. And I would want my $20.
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't be interested in the time travel, but you just want your $20.
Yeah, I just want my $20.
But if you could, where would you travel to? Is the question. I mean, where would Doug go?
Well, I can tell you where I'd go is right where I live. I'd want to see the land, the area that I live in a pristine, untouched, forest 400 or 500 years ago, to me, that would be thrilling. So I wouldn't mess anything up. I wouldn't cause any paradoxes. I would just go and look at the wildlife, the forest, and that's it. And I'd come home.
You would walk around whistling with your hands in your pockets.
Yes, that would avoid
sure not to touch anything. It would be interesting to see the dinosaurs.
Yeah, no.
No big lizards.
Yeah, you could travel back in time with an AR.
Well, this is true. And I've always found it to be fascinating, time travel, the theory of time travel.
Yeah.
But then Einstein kind of steps in and says, you know what? That cannot happen.
The thing is, you'd have to be able to pick a location, too, because you could end up at the bottom of a lake.
You could, yeah. How do you pick your landing zone, so to speak? How do you, is it right where you're standing when you time travel? So if you're in your home right now, like you'd said, you'd want to go back to where your home was to see what it looked like when it was still a forest. Or can they project you to any place in time, or are you stuck where you are?
Well, even that would be a problem unless they had a time travel map. Because think about it. I mean, where I'm standing right now was under 400 feet of ice at one point.
That is true. That is true. Yeah,
you don't want to mess up.
Yeah, prehistoric ocean back in those days. So it's interesting to think about.
And with my luck, Joel, I'd end up on top of a glacier.
Yeah. My luck too. I would end up probably worse yet. I would probably end up, if I'm going to be looking for dinosaurs, I'd probably end up right in a pterodactyl's nest or something, where it's a quick exit.
Yeah.
Where,
Did you ever see the movie? I think the name was just, The Time Machine.
Yes, the old H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells, correct.
Yeah, they remade it, though, like you're saying, some years ago.
Yeah.
The Time Machine, and that, yeah.
I haven't seen the new one, but the old one, when I was a child, I saw that. I couldn't sleep afterwards.
Why is that?
Well, it was haunting, when he went back in time and he saw he saw the area around him changing.
Mm-hmm.
He kept going back farther and farther. Eventually, he's got volcanoes, right? And it just really haunted me. It really did. I swear, I could not sleep. And in fact, I had nightmares.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now. Devil in Disguise. Only on Peacock.
About that movie.
Some would claim that there's already time travelers amongst us. Do you remember the infamous Mike Tyson picture when he's in that fight and that guy's holding a smartphone in the crowd?
Seen this. Yeah, it is interesting.
There's these little pictures that people have caught that technology hasn't existed yet. And that's one of the better presentations of that, or one of the better examples, rather, that was going on. Now, is that a smartphone? We don't know for sure, but it sure makes you think twice about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've studied those photos, and whether they're real or even photoshopped. There's no way for you or me to know that.
No. But I'd have to see the original negative.
Yes, but they look legit. They look legit, but you can't really tell. It's kind of blurry. Is that really a phone? Is that something from the future? I don't know.
All these great claims are always blurry. What's up with that?
Yeah.
Whether it's a Bigfoot or a ghost or whatever, whenever there's this great claim of the supernatural or strange, it's always a fuzzy mess.
Can be, although I don't really think the Patterson footage is that fuzzy.
Oh, no, the Patterson, I guess that would be the exception to that rule, would be the Patterson film. Because in my opinion, that's a Sasquatch. No two ways about it. That's the real deal. You know, that's actual squatch they caught that day.
Yeah. Everybody goes, oh, that's so fuzzy, so blurry. Well, actually, it isn't, especially now that they've enhanced it and whatnot.
Digitized it.
But generally, we don't have any photos of strangeness. We really don't. Not much.
Otherwise, maybe because after we photograph it and we study it the way we could, it would no longer be strange. It would be just natural.
Yeah, no, that's possible. I think back and I think of, where was the first picture of a gorilla? I'd love to see it. Have you seen the first picture of a gorilla?
I have not.
I haven't either.
I have not. I have met some women that looked like a gorilla.
Ooh.
That I thought for sure were going to be gorillas. But no, never the first picture. Now, for the longest time, they didn't even believe that gorillas existed.
Right.
Until those are found. So as we move forward, I mean, every year we're finding new species of life. And it's just a matter of time before, Bigfoot is discovered. And I kind of feel bad for the big fellow once he is discovered in a way. Because we're really good at destroying what we discover.
Yeah, I'm not planning on it in my lifetime, but I've certainly, I've done my best to photos, and I'll tell you, I've been defeated every single time.
Have you ever come close, though, in your estimation, to seeing one? I mean, where you were just so close to that squatch.
I've seen them. I actually have seen them. Once, actually very close to my car, driving down 169 in Minnesota. And it was bright in headlights. I mean, it was literally drying off. You could see this beautiful, very clean hair that was blowing in the wind. It had its back to me, though.
You caught him on bath night.
Yeah, it was bath night. Yeah,
it was bath night, and you came by. Did you take a minute to see, kind of register what you're seeing, or did you slam on the brakes? What what went through your head?
At first, I thought I was looking at the back of a moose. Then my mind went, they reintroduced elk, because it had kind of multicolors to it. And then as I got closer, I realized it was probably, 7.5, 8 feet tall, and I could see the broad shoulders, and I could see the fingers as it did kind of this hula hoop motion. And of course, I've got somebody in the car. They're looking at it too. They're going through the same kind of slideshow I am. And then all of a sudden, you get past it, and you go, holy, whatever.
Yeah.
That was a Bigfoot, because it couldn't have been anything else. And then you look at Google Maps, and you go, oh, my God, there's the stream. There's the wilderness area that it came from. And this is where the stream dumped into Mille Lacs Lake. And he went, it all made, it just geographically it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It does make a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
A lot of people do see them chance encounters. Truck drivers.
Yeah.
A lot of truck drivers over the years I've talked to have seen strange things. Not just Bigfoot, though. UFOs and everything else, because they're logging all those miles. They're going across the country, vast distances.
Joel, if I would have had a dash cam, we would have had one more blurry video.
We would have had just one more for the pile.
Yes, one more for the pile.
Well, that would have been all right, though. I like a good old blurry video, but I'm telling you, there's something to it. And a lot of our listeners know that there's something to it. And we all have heard it in the woods. We've all had that feeling of being watched in the woods or in the forests and things like that. So it's not just us. It's thousands and thousands, if not millions, of people seeing these things every single year. They all can't be crazy.
It's being fueled constantly. If it wasn't fueled, it would die out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can swear to God, I've never gotten a report of a unicorn. Not one.
Me neither. Not one. Other than that, one time I saw a guy super gluing a antler to that one horse's head. That didn't work out so well. I told him, that's not going to work, man. You watch me, I'm going to make this work. And it didn't work. The kids knew better.
Yeah.
They outed him, as a trickster. So, long story. I'll tell it some other time on the
Yeah.
show. We got to get out of here.
I don't want to hear that story.
When we come back, well, let's just say it's a man that wanted to make a quick buck, and it didn't work out so well for him. Cautionary tale more than anything else. We got to get out of here. When we come back, we're going to be talking with David, and it is going to be a whole lot of fun. David Paulides, when we come back, everybody, Missing 411's the movie and the book series. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. You know, set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey, girl. School zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hajicek. We have a hell of a guest on tap for them tonight, don't we, Doug?
Yes, we do.
We have the one and only. Okay, first I got to set this up. I don't ever want to go missing in the woods. I just want to get that out there right now. I would not like that. That is one of my fears and phobias, is to go missing in the woods. I just want to throw that out there right at the top.
And what's even scarier is having somebody you love go missing.
Yes, exactly. I think it's not because obviously it's because you're going missing, but it's also the unanswered questions you leave behind about your whereabouts. Tonight we have David Paulides with us tonight, and he is the author of the book series 411 about just that. People that have gone missing. Now, David is a very, very accomplished investigator. Not just an investigator, but he has a background, 20-year background in law enforcement. This man knows how to track people. He understands how people work. He has been looking into these cases for several years now. And he is the go-to man on these particular missing persons cases. We are very honored to have him on the show with us tonight. David, welcome to Untold Radio.
Hey, thanks, guys. I feel honored to be on the show, so I appreciate the invitation.
The pleasure is definitely all ours, most definitely. And, well, I guess we got to ask you right away, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mentioned you're in law enforcement, but I guess what got you interested in these particular cases from 411 and other things that you worked? Excuse me.
So I spent 20 years in municipal law enforcement in California. I left and worked in HR because I had a master's degree in HR, worked in that and technology. And when I was working there, made a lot of good.
If you've got a personal auto insurance question, you could talk to a cab driver, although the policies he recommends might include avoiding the interstate, beating traffic by taking the back roads, and only making left turns when absolutely necessary. Or you could talk to your local Geico agent, whose policy is to use their expertise to navigate your insurance, finding the best route to help you save money on insurance for your home, car, and more. And as an added bonus, you'll be able to avoid traffic jams and potholes entirely. To find a Geico agent near you, visit geico.com/local.
Friends, and after working there a number of years, I retired again and started to write some books. And one day I was at a national park, and I saw a couple of park rangers following me around. And I went back to my my room that was off the park, and one of those guys that was following me around came and met me, followed later by the second person. And they told me about a series of disappearances that they had worked when they were in national parks at other locations. And when they had met at the park that they were then, they kind of compared notes, and they figured out that at the beginning of these missing people cases, there was a lot of publicity, there was a lot of action, there was a lot of searching, and then in that 7 to 10 day frame, everything would stop. And then later on, when these two started to go out on their own and do a little research, they were thwarted in their attempts. They couldn't get reports. They figured out that there was no follow-up being done. It's like that these cases fell into a vacuum and nobody cared. And they had read some of my books in the past, and they said, hey, you're the guy that ought to be looking into this. And there's really something here. There's an abnormal number of people missing, but they're not just missing from in areas where you would think they'd go missing, deep in the backcountry and stuff, but they were also missing from areas that were really close to the park headquarters and residential areas that didn't make sense to them. So the next day I'm leaving the park. I call a couple of law enforcement friends, and I said, hey, could you run the numbers in this area of this national park and just see if there's a lot of people missing? A couple hours later, the guy calls me back and says, hey, Dave, there are. And he says, they go way back in time. And yeah, it's strange. That's kind of how I initially got into it. And right after I got that information, I came home and I filed a series of Freedom of Information Act requests against the National Park Service Police. So there's about 400 different properties that the National Park Service manages, including national monuments and national parks. And then they have the National Park Police assigned to them, an independent agency that does all the law enforcement function at those properties. And they're trained at the National Law Enforcement Training Center. They're highly trained, professional people. So, you know, a few months later, I get a notice back from them saying that, well, we did your search, and we don't have any lists of missing people, because I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for a list of missing people from their jurisdiction and from the closest park to me when I was living in California, which was Yosemite. And they said, we don't have lists from either one of those locations. And I said, okay, I'm a printed author. I'm a published author. There's an exemption in FOIA for that. I want you to go out and get the information. About 4 or 5 weeks later, I get a call back from an attorney in the National Park Service. And he said, Mr. Paulides, we did a search of your books, and they aren't in enough libraries to qualify for an exemption. And I said, ho, wait a minute. I said, I know the FOIA laws pretty well. There's no such clause. Oh, no, it's not there, but it's one of our internal mechanisms. So we're not going to grant you your exemption. You're going to have to pay it. I go, pay it? They said, yeah, if you want a list from the National Park Service, it's going to cost you $1.4 million. And if you want one from Yosemite, it's going to cost you $34,000. So that was about 10 years ago. And I just got pissed. When I heard that, I got really, really mad. And I said, I'm a pretty good investigator. I'm pretty tenacious. I'm going to recruit some friends, and we're going to go out, and we'll just archive it, and we'll figure this out. Mm-hmm. And about 5 or 6 years into it, I figured out 99% of everybody in Yosemite who was missing. And guess what they did? They released the list of missing people from Yosemite. But they haven't, well, that's because I've already written about them in the books. But they haven't released the numbers from any other park. Occasionally, they'll release an ongoing missing person case, but they've never released all their numbers or the people. And within the National Park Police, they have detectives. And those detectives in the National Park Police are called special agents, just like FBI agents, but they're the detectives for the Park Service. So there was a case I was looking for in Yosemite named Stacy Aris. She disappeared from Yosemite National Park in 1981. She lived in a town next to me in Saratoga, California. And she was 14. She traveled into the backcountry with her dad on horseback on a contracted concessionaire at Yosemite with several other people. And they rode into this area called Tenaya Lakes. They got off. She went into the cabin with her dad. And she comes out and she goes, hey, Dad, I'm going to go over to this point with this 82-year-old man right here, and we're just going to take pictures. Everybody sees her walk out to that point. This old man's old, could barely move. And she leaves the old man. They see her walking down this boulder-ridden field of granite down towards the lake. That's the last time she's ever seen. A search, they find the lens cam to her camera inside the tree line, but they never find her. So I filed the Freedom of Information Act request for that report from the National Park Service. Now, one thing your listening public needs to understand is missing person investigations are one of the very few things in law enforcement that we do that isn't criminal in nature. It's not against the law to go missing. You can decide to fall out of society if you want. And law enforcement will follow up if your relatives say, hey, Doug Hajicek ran away from home last night. We got to go find him. Well, maybe Doug just got sick of his family for the night and decided to run away. But it's not against the law to do that. And so law enforcement takes the report and we go out and look. Same with the national parks. So when I request this report, I know it's not a criminal investigation, which is an exemption in FOIA. So I get a call from a special agent from the Park Service, an agent named Stephen Yu, Y-U. And he starts off right out of the top, why do you want this report? Not, hey, how you doing, Dave? Fellow law enforcement.
Yeah, no niceties. It's right to the quick. What the hell do you want this for, basically?
Right. And I said, I'm doing some research on missing people, and I want it. And he says, you're never going to see this report. I go, hey, Steve, why are you talking to me like this? I mean, I'm in law enforcement. I know this isn't a criminal case. He goes, no, you're never going to see it. I said, why is that? And he goes, it's none of your business. And I said, well, can you tell me if anyone's looked at this case in 39 years? At the time, I think it was 35 years. He said, I doubt it. I said, is there any criminal suspects or any criminal investigation? No. I said, then why wouldn't you release it? None of your business. And then I told him, I said, well, I filed probably at least 2 or 3 dozen other requests from other parks, and I've gotten those open, active case files from them. So why aren't you going to give me this one? And he goes, you're lying. You haven't gotten anything like that. And that got me mad because I don't lie to people. And I did have probably 3 dozen at the time open case files from other parks and monuments. And to this day, I've never gotten Stacy Aris's report. They've released fractions, photos. They've never released the report. They've never released the supplemental reports. And it bugs the hell out of me because, number one, Why wouldn't they release it? Why wouldn't they want publicity about it? There's something there that I don't understand. But Yosemite is different than every other park in the National Park Service, the way it's managed and the way it's controlled. And ask me more about Yosemite later, because I even have a better story for you. But go ahead, I've been talking long enough.
David, this is Doug. One of the things I'm really curious about, are there more females that go missing than males? Or is it kind of 50-50?
No, I would say it's probably 65-35 men.
Is that because more men use the national forests? Or is it because it's just the way it is?
Well, as an example, one of the books I wrote in the 9-book series is called Missing 411 Hunters. And it's a story of about 150 hunters, armed hunters who knew the area they were in. Sometimes they'd hunted it for decades, and they disappeared. Now, there are 3 cases in the 150, 160 where there were wives and girlfriends that went with the hunters that disappeared from the hunting camp. So when you talk about going into the woods alone, I mean, I've been out there thousands of times, and I do see lone females out there sometimes hiking around, and I cringe, especially when I'm with my significant other, because I tell everybody, don't go into the woods alone ever, because there's something in my profile points called point of separation. Point of separation is when you get away from other people. Maybe you're hiking with 3 people, and you go off and go to the bathroom. Something happens, and it's that point of separation that something unknown occurs and you disappear.
And that point of separation can be seconds. Am I correct?
Yes, it can. Exactly. Sometimes I have stories where it's a mom, a dad, a few kids, and they're looking at the river, and the father said, "My son was behind me just seconds ago. I turned around and he was gone."
Wow.
That is insane, because sometimes, it's like they just fell off the face of the earth, like vanished. Like you see a trail and there's no more trail after that. It makes you wonder, how it's happening. But more importantly, I guess I shouldn't say more importantly, but rarely do you ever find, you'll find the possessions, but it's weird stuff like a Bic lighter or the rifle laying there, I'm assuming. The stuff that they would never ordinarily drop. I wonder what's making these people, A, disappear, like almost perfectly, like where'd they go? And B, what would compel them to leave their prized possessions behind?
So for the person who's never really heard of these investigations or my analysis before, it's easy to go in your mind to the point of saying, well, it's a mountain lion attack or it's a bear, except when these things happen, nothing's ever heard. And then another of the profile points that I talk about in the books, and a profile point is something where if you look at 50 missing person cases, it's hard to really glean anything from that. If you look at 5,000, certain things are going to show its ugly head to you every so many times. And when I first started this, I had piles of reports in different parts of my room where certain things became evident. In 95+% of the cases I talk about in my books, trained canines, bloodhounds, brought to the scene can't pick up a scent or don't want to track a scent. Sometimes the dog will walk 5 feet from the handler, turn around, come back and sit down, like they're uninterested. Other times they'll go down the trail, turn around, stop, and they know for a fact the person walked down this trail with other people, but they don't want to go down there. And that's one of the really strange ones. The other part to that is that when they bring in trained trackers, the trackers can't find tracks leaving the scene.
That's incredible. I mean, you would think that everybody leaves a trail, some type of evidence. I guess, okay, you get called, David. They say this hunter's gone missing. He's been gone 5 days. When you arrive on scene, what are the first things that you...
Stick it to cheat day with flavor that fuels. 2 new flavors from Reign Total Body Fuel.
He shoots, he scores!
cherry limeade, wild cherry with a burst of lime, and white gummy bear, tangy tart pineapple goodness, 300 milligrams of natural caffeine, electrolytes, BCAAs, and CoQ10. Sweet without the cheat. Take that, sugar. Try new Rain Cherry Limeade and White Gummy Bear. A total body fuel ×2.
Look for that gives you a clue where to begin.
So first of all, once you understand search and rescue, you would never, ever go to the scene like that. Search and rescue people are notoriously territorial, to the point of being rude and abusive to other search and rescue groups that want to help. I can tell you dozens of times where a certain county search and rescue group gets offered assistance from other counties and they turn them away, because there's some ego mechanism in them that says, we can find them, we don't need your help. Now, there's cases I've written about that were huge cases at the time. A boy disappeared in northern Colorado named Jared Adadero, and they weren't having any luck with finding him at all. And the dad got on the phone and got some of the best canine-trained dogs in the world to come in from out of state. And the search and rescue person for the county said, hey, we're not using those dogs. And finally, Mr. Adadero had to say, you're using the dogs or I'm going to the press and I'm going to tell them what you're doing. And then they used the dogs. And unfortunately, that's the way it works.
Have you ever interviewed the actual owners of these tracking dogs? Because, I've had a chance to work with tracking dogs. They're pretty much 100% never fail. I mean, they can pick up a scent that's just incredibly, one or two molecules that's a week old. So doesn't that shock you more than almost anything? The fact that the bloodhounds cannot find any kind of trail?
So when I was a policeman, for a number of years, I worked on the SWAT team. And we were a SWAT team 24/7. And the canines for the city, there were 30 of them, were assigned to our unit. And so we all trained together all the time. So when we were in the field, and let's say a patrolman starts chasing an armed robbery suspect into a field, they'll hold at the field, they'll call us, we'll come out, the dog handler will come out, and then we will search with the dog handler because they know what we'll do, they'll know what we'll do. Mm-hmm. And I've told people this, 99 times out of 99 times, we got our person. I can never remember a time when we didn't put one of our dogs on somebody and we didn't catch the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm with Doug. I guess it just doesn't happen where you don't find them.
Well, there's examples where they'll take a bloodhound, put him on a trail of somebody in a closed car with the windows up, and they'll drive through a city, and the bloodhound can follow where the car went.
You're going to hear a lot of people who are marginal experience, marginally train their dog, that really aren't as competent as they should be. And I'm not putting anybody down, but there's some people who, just like a training with a gun, a firearm, there's people that are really good with a gun, and there's people that can barely shoot the gun. Mm-hmm. Same with canine training. You train with your dog every day, like we did at the police department, that dog is going to get really good and really committed and really excited. You train with that dog once every 2 weeks, I don't know if you really want to bring him to the scene. But if that's the only supposed trained dog in that county, you're going to use them.
Going back to what you're talking about, search and rescue and the turf mentality, you wouldn't think they wouldn't care. You wouldn't think they'd care the means as long as the people get brought back to their families, or at least there's some closure for the families with the missing. Would you be willing to...
Incorrect, my young man.
Okay.
I haven't found one of those locations yet in all of the cases I've worked with families. They all have stories of this territoriality. They're the best. They know what they're doing. And here's the reality of that. When there's a big case, a child disappears in the wilderness and they've been gone 2 or 3 days, I guarantee almost with 100% certainty that the person running that search has never run a big search before. Mm-hmm. And the thought that they really truly know what they're doing, probably not. And unfortunately, they learn by their mistakes at the cost of your child.
Sure.
And
sure.
They're not going to back down and they're going to act like they're in command because that's their training. So,
but aren't there cases, David, where they've had just massive amounts of trained bloodhounds that are really good?
Of course. Oh, yeah. There's hundreds of cases where people were lost in the woods and they were found by dogs. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm not minimizing at all the importance of dogs. If it was my son or daughter, I'd say, hell yeah, bring in every dog you can. Let's go. Break it up into grids, give one dog a grid, and split it up, and let's go.
Yeah, if it were my kid out there missing, I'd be like, I don't give a damn what you got to do. I don't even care if you bring in some weird psychic. Whatever it takes to get the person, I want them found. I wouldn't care the means, you know, because as a parent, that's all that matters to you, is your child coming home.
So, David, can you give us kind of a laundry list for anybody who's not familiar with the patterns that you investigate? Give us the laundry list.
Okay, so first of all, we don't investigate every missing person who disappears in the wild. They've got to fit this criteria. And we go through a vetting process. The first thing is does the person have any mental illness, or could this be a voluntary disappearance? Like I'm saying, you know, if somebody has a problem with a family, if they're a runaway, if they are drug or alcohol dependent, if they're suicidal, we won't work those cases. If there's any evidence of animal predation, and search and rescue will know this right away. If somebody gets attacked by an animal, there's a big scene there, there's a big fight, people fight for their lives, there's going to be torn clothing, blood, torn up ground, they're going to know. Now, a lot of people hear these stories and they say, oh, you know, it was a mountain lion attack or it was a bear attack. And at every conference I go to, I said, okay, how many mountain lions have killed people in North America in the last 100 years? And I get people saying, you know, it's probably a couple hundred at least. Some people say, well, it's probably, 50 to 75. No. In all of North America, including Canada, in the last 100 years, 16.
That's all?
That's it.
I mean, you would assume the number, like everybody else that you were talking to, you would assume the number would be bigger just because of the reputation.
No. Now, there were a couple of cases that were on there that were completely incorrect. One of them was the Atadero case. And Mr. Atadero proved to him that mountain lion, even though the sheriff said a mountain lion killed his son, he had 3 mountain lion experts come in and say, nope, the evidence doesn't point to a mountain lion. And there's a lot of these cases on there where the sheriffs or the experts want to shuffle it away, don't want to address it, and want to forget it, and they'll attribute it to a mountain lion. Later on, it's turned out that's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the vetting process before we even think about it. Now, like I said, 95 to 98% of the time, canines can't pick up a scent. Lack of tracks. It's in an area where there's a lot of boulders or granite. The number one cluster area in the world that fits our profile, Yosemite National Park. What's the one place in the world that has the most high-density granite? Yosemite National Park. A lot of times, the victims are found in or near a body of water. And I'm talking on the bank of a creek, on the bank of a lake. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're found in the water. A lot of times, if they're found deceased, they can't find a cause of death, and that's not normal. Other times, the victims, it could be 85 degrees outside, and they find their shoes stacked together in an area that makes no sense at all. Or they find clothing stripped off of them 100 yards from where they were last seen, and it's 90 degrees outside. There's no hypothermia involved. There's nothing like that. And all of a sudden, they're missing clothing and missing shoes. That's a really common point that nobody can explain. The other thing is that if the victim's found, more times than not, they'll be of an age where they can't explain or they can't speak and explain what happened. And then if they're older, they can't explain how they disappeared, where they disappeared, or how they got back. Mm-hmm. That missing time, missing memory is really common. So those are the big predominant ones.
Well, who's more likely to go missing as far as, we talked about male and female, but are hunters at a bigger risk, like to go missing than the average just person walking the woods, or doesn't it matter? Because, when I was getting ready for the show, I noticed that there's a large segment of hunters that go missing.
Yeah, but you also have to remember that during that certain 45 days to 60 days out of the year, millions of people, millions of hunters go into the woods where they never go into the woods during the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And no, I don't think it's a higher percentage at all.
It's just pure numbers. You get that many people in the woods at one time, there's bound to be some missing.
Right.
That makes sense.
Are there any new patterns, David, that you've thought about or kind of recently discovered, or things that you haven't really placed them yet in any kind of hierarchy?
So one of the things when you're a policeman and you're dealing with a series of crimes, we had a map on the wall, and it was a giant map. And let's say we had a series of robberies downtown. We'd start plotting them. And we knew that the first robbery in a series of crimes was the closest to their home. But people just don't commit crimes in their own neighborhood, but we knew that was the closest one. And usually from there it starts to arch out away from the home. And I started, when I was looking at these cases, I thought, you know what? I think I remember hearing about this one location a few other times. And then I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to plot all these on a giant U.S. map. And that's what I did. And I call it the cluster map. And in North America, I have 59 clusters of missing people that fit our profile. And in essence, it kind of goes up the western part of the U.S., up through the Sierras, Cascades, up to British Columbia, down around the top of Idaho, Montana, and then down through the Rockies. There's a big gap in cases in Nevada and right through the center of the United States. And then they pick up again, and they kind of follow the Appalachian Trail up the East Coast and around the Great Lakes. And in essence, there's about 80% of the cases that I've chronicled are within 200 miles of either the Pacific Coast, Atlantic Coast, or the Great Lakes. And water, there's something about water in these cases. I can't explain it.
I got a question for you, though. Is it more north or is it more south, or doesn't it matter? Does the southern United States have more missing or just as much? Like, for instance, Mississippi. Do they have as many missing people as Michigan, for instance?
So Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, for some reason, hardly have any cases. Now, in police work, that would mean that your suspect lives in that neighborhood because you don't do something in your own neighborhood. Now, what is one thing all those three states have? A lot of water, if you think about it. And then as you follow, say, Louisiana going north up the Mississippi, you can kind of see the cases follow the Mississippi and other tributaries up towards Wisconsin and North Dakota and those areas, and they kind of fan out. And then as you look through the high plateaus of Colorado, where there's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of missing people. And yeah, it's a conundrum. It's very difficult. I've had that map out there, and you can get it on our website it's evolved over time, but it's been out there for over 6 years. And nobody can really come up with a good explanation of why it sits the way it does.
Yeah, because I was kind of curious. I was going to ask you the same thing about your map. Why does it sit that way, but you just answered it? No one knows.
Is there a certain color of clothing that people are wearing when they're going missing, David? Or is it all over the map?
So there was a couple of cases out of Malaysia where some people disappeared. It was kind of odd circumstances, and some of the local natives there said that there was some kind of spirit in the jungle that would chase you and take you if you were wearing bright clothing. And when you translate and you think about that, well, there's a lot of hunters, when they hunt, they wear bright orange.
Mm-hmm.
So does that have something to do with it? And then when you start to, you don't get this all the time, but when some of the missing person reports, it'll say what the person was last wearing. And it's counterintuitive because a lot of the missing people wear bright clothing, but they're not found right away.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
So it is safe to say people who've gone missing, more of them had bright colored clothing on.
I don't know if I'd say that, but I'd probably say I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to rifle hunters in the woods, everybody knows the old rule of 3 shots in the air. Are they following those rules, these hunters that do go missing, or are they so panicked they don't even think about that?
So unfortunately, in hunter safety, they don't teach that to all the classes. And there's a lot of hunters, especially young ones, that don't even know that rule. And I know about that because when I spoke at conferences, people come up to me and they go, "Wow, Dave, we never heard that." And just so people understand, when you go hunting, you should carry somewhere north of 20 rounds. And I know that seems like overkill, but hold on for a second. So let's say you go out in the woods and you're lost. Well, what you want to do is you fire off 3 rounds. And that's a signal to people that you're hunting with or friends that someone's in distress and they need help. In return, you fire off a couple rounds yourself. And then every hour or so, the person that's missing fires off 3 rounds. So you could slowly hone in on the signal. That has saved many lives in the past. Now, in the cases that I've worked up, people have heard the first 3 rounds, but then they never hear anything more after that, and the person is never found.
Ooh. Gee, it begs the question of why. I mean, what comes over them that they just disregard all of that stuff? Because me as a hunter, because I'm an avid deer hunter and elk hunter and bear hunter, and that's the first thing I would think of is keep doing that. Just like we're taught, the way that you would just mention it, because they don't teach that anymore in hunter safety. Like you'd said, but back when I was a kid, they did teach that. They taught you how to signal when you are in distress. And it's kind of shocking they don't teach that anymore.
So the one thing that everybody who goes into the woods should do, and 99.9% of everybody who comes into those woods would come out safely, is that everybody should carry a personal locator beacon. And what that is a device about the size of your cell phone, and when you activate it, it sends a signal to a satellite. A satellite sends a signal to the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration that an alert has just gone off. It gives the GPS coordinates. They look on a map. They call local search and rescue. They tell them that an alert just went out in your area, and they can go out and find you within 10 feet. If people carried those all the time, this would not be happening 99% of the time, in my opinion. Now, there's one fact that I've told over and over and over again. People, I think, have a hard time believing this. I don't have one case where someone was carrying a firearm and carrying a personal locator beacon that disappeared and wasn't found. I don't have one. I do have 2 cases where people were carrying personal locator beacons where they disappeared. One person was found deceased in a really weird location, and another person, the alert went off, they looked for him and they couldn't find him. He never was found, but he wasn't carrying a gun.
Yeah. So if you got both of those things going for you, you're much safer in the wilderness because A, you have a way to signal, and B, you have a signature where at least your last known location.
Well, the million-dollar question is, what is it about both of those that makes you immune to what's going on?
Good question.
Yeah.
Very good question.
Well, I often wonder, okay, what is going through their mind when they're dropping their lighter? They haven't even tried their cell phone. They never tried an outgoing call. They're dropping their boots. Why would you get rid of your boots if you're lost? So don't you really wonder what's going through the minds of these victims? I mean, it's got to really haunt you, wondering what are they thinking?
So I wrote a book called Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence. And it's the one book I've written out of the 9 where it was written about cases that happen in the city. And Doug, these happen out by you. One case was in downtown St. Paul, and another one was in far western Minnesota. One case was a guy named Zamlen, Z-A-M-L-E-N, at a party down in downtown Minnesota, St. Paul, went to school there, left a party, wasn't drunk, and he was on a phone with a girlfriend, not an emotional girlfriend, just like a friend. And he's walking along, and she's going, "Where you at? Where you at?" And he kind of explains, and then all of a sudden he gets extreme fear. The phone goes dead. Like, oh my God, you got to be here. Boom, phone's dead.
Ooh.
Well, then like 10 days later, they find him in the river near the Ford factory, dead. Nobody could explain, including the police, how he ever got in the river. Nobody could explain he would never go in the river. Mm-hmm. And at the time he was talking to her, everybody thought he was at least 3 blocks from the river. Mm-hmm. Now, there's another case where a young man was going to college in far eastern Minnesota, and he was coming home for the weekend, and he high-centered his car on a dirt road, and he got lost, which nobody could say because he'd made this trip 20 times. And he gets out of the car, and he's talking to his mom and his dad, and he goes, "Yeah, you better come and get me. Here's where I think I am." So they're driving there. And then he tells him, "Hey, I see some lights off in the distance," but he doesn't explain much about the lights. And he goes, "I'm walking towards him right now." And then all of a sudden he yells, "Oh my God," phone goes dead. It's the last they ever hear of him. And they searched they eventually find the car. It's about 10 miles off from where he said he thought he was. And that boy's never been found. The young man's never been found. So there are, and that's just a handful of cases, but there's many more cases that I've written about where people were on the phone, showed extreme fear right at the last minute, phone goes dead, they're never found.
That sounds similar to the Henry McCabe case. I think I believe you investigated that, David.
I know that case very well. And
tell the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, what is that case? Doug had brought it up to me the other day, and I wasn't familiar with it.
Henry was a state auditor from Minnesota, had a really good job, and he went out with some friends one night drinking, and they drop him off at a local gas station, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to get something to eat. I'll just walk home, no big deal." And his wife was gone that night on, I think, a business assignment or something. And his friend leaves. People say he got something, and he took off. Well, sometime after that, like about 2 hours later, his wife gets a voicemail from him, and he leaves a message on the phone of him screaming. Something else is screaming back at him. It doesn't even sound human. And it's the strangest voicemail that you ever want to hear. And then days later, he's found deceased in this lake. Now, people say, "Oh, if you're really drunk, you're going to fall in the lake." That's complete garbage. He was a long ways from this lake. He's found in the lake. And if you read my book, a lot of these cases end up in lakes or rivers. And a large percentage of those, there's an unknown cause of death. Well, you think, well, if he's going in there, he must have drowned. No, they don't drown all the time. And then people say, well, why did they die? So several years ago, my son was playing hockey in Ohio, and he was playing in a division championship on the East Coast, and I went there, and a coroner from a very, very large East Coast jurisdiction had been reading my books and asked to meet with me. So in between the games on different days, I meet with this person, and they said, so this person's a physician and a coroner for a big jurisdiction. And they said, "Dave, you're on to something huge. I've been doing this for many years, and every coroner in my office has faced this exact issue of an unknown cause of death, and it bugs the hell out of us. Something is happening that we don't understand, and as scientists, physicians, and coroners, the body should tell us everything, and it doesn't." And then they invited me to make a presentation in front of a national coroners meeting, and I couldn't do it that year because they wanted to publicize this so people would have it on their radar. So go ahead, Doug.
Well, is there a way, David, that they can tell whether the person drowned by the amount of water in their lungs, or is there a way to tell whether they just fell in the lake after they died?
So both. I mean, there's other ways to drown other than having water in your lungs, number one. And here's a strange thing that a lot of policemen don't even know this. But when men drown in water, men drown face down. Women drown face up. And it has to do with body structure and things.
Yeah.
About
is there a murder out there, David?
up.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
With no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, banking with Capital One is like the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Kind of like Taylor Swift choosing what to wear.
It's looking kind of chilly out today. I think I'll go with a cardigan.
Yep, even easier than that. And with our top-rated app, you can bank anytime, anywhere, making Capital One an even easier decision. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
New consumer accounts only. Approval required. Terms apply. Capital One NA member FDIC.
Is there a murder out there? Do you think this is murder, some of this?
So in the conventional sense, no. In the strict definition, probably yeah.
Because the story you just told a little bit ago about the people having fear over the phone before they went missing, there had to have been a perpetrator or something involved to invoke that fear. And then they end up being found dead, some of them. And if that's the case, is it a random crime? Do you believe this is just a random crime, especially when we're talking about urban areas? When that happens in an urban area, is it more just like a random act of violence? Or do you think they were stalked and killed? What's your feelings on that?
So let's talk about the random act of violence. Now, if you were looking for an easy victim to randomly commit a crime against, there's tons of homeless and things along rivers and in downtown sections of the city where they don't have a lot of people around them and be easy to go commit the crime. I've said this many times at conferences. The people that I'm talking about, that I write about in these books that fit these profiles, are college students, a lot of times college athletes. Mm-hmm. Many times they're in the upper 5% of their class. I have never found a case that fits our profile where there's somebody that's living on the bank of a river that is this classic homeless, down and out, unfortunate person. I don't get those cases involving this.
That is so strange.
Now, when you look at all these,
you take Henry McCabe, David. He was highly educated. He actually apparently died in a pretty wooded area. I know that area, and that area is, it's pretty much. It's not a wilderness area by any means, but it's a huge tract of land that's full of swamps, small lakes and trees and forest.
That means people would be missed. I mean,
there's no way. I can't picture Henry McCabe running into a person 2 a.m. in the middle of this Rice Creek area. There's just nobody out there.
Well, plus he didn't suffer any injuries that were consistent with an attack.
Nope.
Mm-hmm. 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 Now, I'm going to bring up something that, and if you think it's bunk, please tell me, because the audience has brought this to my attention about 1,000 times over the years. And bear with me, David. What do you think about the chances of it being the smiley face killer? Is that even such a thing?
So, one of the detectives that came up with the smiley face profile was a detective from New York. And I'm telling you right from the get-go, that guy was one of the best missing person detectives in the world. Because a lot of guys working missing persons aren't there by choice, trust me. They'd rather be working homicide or some other. But this guy really gave it a good go. And he started to realize that the missing people he was pulling out of the river, the bodies didn't show the amount of water time that they should show for the amount of time they were missing. Meaning, let's say somebody goes missing 2 weeks ago and they were missing near the river, well, then their body should show certain symptoms of being in that river for 2 weeks, and they weren't. Or a person falls in the river at point A, should be found downstream at point B, but they're found upstream at point C. And he started looking at all these things, just like a real good investigator. Now, these guys were looking at these cases from a little local jurisdiction, as I would if I was those guys. But I had the convenience of looking at it from 30,000 feet. And way before they came out with this, I wrote a book 6 years ago called Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, that talked about these exact cases happening all over the world. And they were talking about just New York and a few other locations. No, it was New York, it was Chicago, it was Boston, it was the UK, it was Spain. I went right down the books and said the exact same things were happening. Now, maybe they did find smiling faces in their area. I've never heard of another smiling face happen in any of the cases I wrote about, though. Yeah. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. I'm not going to call them liar by any means, but when you look at it from a wide sense, all of a sudden, unknown cause of death, you know, these highly educated people, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's quite an interesting set of circumstances.
The reason why I kind of brought it up is because, you know, through the mass, people asking me about this, because we have done true crime radio with a forensic psychologist for years. And that story would not die. People wanted to hear about it. So finally, I was sick of hearing about it and fielding questions about it. So I went and called the FBI, and I talked to the FBI about smiley face. Number one, they laughed me pretty much off the phone. Right? Yeah, whatever. That's not a thing. Okay, that's just not a thing. And number two, then later on, they got back hold of me and they said, "This is what's going on. These people are dying. We don't know how or why, but what is strange, and we'll give you this, is they're not drowning. They are placed there." And then that was all they gave me. They wouldn't talk any more about the cases. Is that the case? Are they? I guess when you find somebody in the water, it's got to be, you still got to be able to tell the cause of death, even though the water's involved, right, David?
So it doesn't matter if it's on land or in the water. You should be able to figure out the cause of death. And in many of the cases I've written about, they can't, which is part of the unconventional nature of what I write about.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the FBI for a second. Way back in the 1950s, there were a series of disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains going north from Tennessee. And I started to notice that the FBI was showing up on these cases. And they would say to the other law enforcement agencies, "Hey, we're just here to monitor the case. We're not really here to get involved." Now, what the FBI does is they are masters at documentation. And they write up the reports and they send it to their profiling unit in Virginia. And then they get all these masses of cases and they try to put them together to find linkage. Now, they know far more about what I'm talking about, I guarantee it. Because in all of these cases that I'm writing about where there are these unknown parts, the FBI is showing up. And to think that they aren't showing up anymore is complete garbage. Now, there's one of our movies, it's called Missing 411, The Hunted. You can watch it on Amazon Prime right now. And in one of those stories, an elderly man disappears in the middle of the woods in New York. He's hunting with 4 of his best buddies that he's hunted with forever, and all of their sons. And while the older men are sitting down and the boys are pushing the deer from the woods towards them, this man disappears. And a day or two after the search starts, who shows up there? The FBI. Now, if you look at the protocol for the FBI, no, they don't search for missing people. And it says it right there. They do not handle missing adults. Missing children under certain circumstances that are defined. Missing adults, no. When I interviewed on film one of the heads of the search and rescue, and I asked him, who called the FBI? He goes, I don't know. When I asked him, what was the FBI doing there? He didn't know. You telling me with everything we have in our world criminally, that they can send 2 FBI agents on an old missing man case in the middle of the woods and spend days up there?
Makes no sense. None.
Doesn't make any sense. Why would they waste the resources? You know, because you're right. When you look into the FBI, they're not into the missing persons business. They're, unless, like you said, in special circumstances, they will. But it has to be pretty extraordinary before they get involved.
Has the military, David, ever gotten involved?
Yeah, and that's another very strange part of it, is that there's been 3 cases that I know of. And let me explain the branches of the military. So the National Guard, that's people from your neighborhood and my neighborhood that volunteer to do the military service on weekends and a month at a time during the summer. And they come back, and after they do their time, they come and they talk to us and they party with us, and et cetera. And then there's people in the Green Berets. Now, the Green Berets have to sign a secrecy oath. A lot of people don't know this. And part of that secrecy oath is even after they retire, they don't say anything about what they did. Now, on the cases that I know of where they searched for missing children in the United States, it was not the National Guard. It was the Green Berets. Now, I have a Freedom of Information Act request against the very Green Beret unit commander to get the orders about why they went to where they did. And I filed this 4 years ago. And not only did I never get a response, I never got anything out of them. So,
like a total stonewall.
Total. And I've had other people who were Green Berets or relatives of Green Berets say, hey, we don't search for missing people. That's baloney. Somebody saying that, well, I've got the pictures of them there searching. So if they weren't searching, what were they doing?
Exactly. Because I'm listening to what you're telling me, and I'm kind of looking on the internet about you're right. They are not a branch of the military. That'd be the National. That would actually be left to the National Guard to help find people as well. They will call on the National Guard in certain circumstances to help assist law enforcement. But the Green Beret, that makes zero sense because they're kind of expensive to have around on top of everything else.
But, you know, if you wanted to keep a lid on the information and you didn't want it getting out about what you were really doing, you wouldn't want the National Guard. You'd want the Green Berets.
Yeah, because those boys that go home, get a few drinks in them, and start talking.
Sure.
Makes complete sense for secrecy's sake. But why? I mean, you know, really, and I know that's probably the same question you have is right along with us, is why? Why all the secrecy? Why not be a little more open?
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
That's probably the $1 million question. I mean, have you ever guys watched this show called MonsterQuest?
I know the guy that made that movie or that show, by the way, and great guy.
Great guy, great series. So if half the stuff that Doug covered in that series existed in the woods, there's a lot more going on than we really know about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally seen enough in my life to scare the living crap out of me. Because when you see things and you have a witness and you're both kind of confused, and then all of a sudden people you know won't go with you anymore to certain, you know, they won't go with you up north. And there
you
is
lost a travel companion.
Truth, but it's still a gray area. You know, it's still a very gray area. But I do
Doug,
know
I got
this.
a question for you, Doug.
Go.
In that cabin where you guys took a bunch of people up to that lake up in, I think it was Canada?
Yes.
How many miles were you from the nearest road when you were at that cabin?
Well, if you were if you were counting winter roads, there's some probably winter roads that maybe go 40 miles or so. But I can, only talk about what I've seen with my own eyes, and that is I've flown all over that country. I have never seen a road near there, except where you can see that some trees have been cut. There's no way a vehicle or even a four-wheeler could get through there unless there's 3 feet of snow. So it's a long ways. I mean, we flew in there. We got flew in and got dropped off.
So when you guys were there, and in the middle of the night, rocks are hitting the roof of the cabin.
Right.
The thought that anybody walked in there and is throwing rocks in your cabin, is that possible?
No, it's not. It actually is not possible. The outfitter was the first person to say, I believe it was anything versus humans. Anything. And you hear that from, you know how these outfitters are completely no BS. Mm-hmm. He would have been the first one to say, it's just some people that came in here or some other fishermen. There's no way in there. Even if you have a boat, there's no way in there.
So you're not saying that you're telling me that the neighbor isn't going to be coming by for a cup of sugar anytime soon.
No. And for what reason are they going to throw a big log at the cabin in the middle of the night? For what reason? Things that would shake the entire cabin. Yeah, it's kind of odd. I mean, there's a lot of mysteries in the world, which I'm grateful for. They get me up in the morning. But will we ever solve them? That's the question. And David, you know what amazes me about you? Nobody but you saw that there was this pattern. Nobody connected the dots. And if you wouldn't have come around, to this day, no one would know anything about missing people in forested areas under words. I mean, does that scare you that you're the only one in the entire world that put the dots together? Doesn't that bother you?
So, as a group, we've sat around and we've talked about this before, and part of that, I think, comes back to really good marketing and dropping that barrier of fear that families have in going to, let's just say, national parks. There's this feeling of complete safety, freedom. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a Disneyland feeling when people go to the woods many times.
Yep, you get your brochure when you walk in the door.
Yeah. And in reality, people need to understand that there could be a wild animal in the bush 5 feet from you. You don't let your kids wander around just because you're in a national park. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think the marketing part of it and their reluctance to admit any statistics about missing and et cetera, they've kind of kept this umbrella over them to a good advantage.
I was going to ask you, how heavily redacted is your information when you finally do get it through the Freedom of Information Act?
Well, if it's an FBI file, it's about 80% redacted and it's completely worthless. Oh. There was a case involving a young man named Charles McCullough who disappeared from Crater Lake. And he went up there to see it. He was from Virginia. Crater Lake's in Oregon. Gorgeous, gorgeous park. And he disappeared. And it was in the middle of winter. There was 20-foot snow drifts. And nobody could figure out where he went. And his dad, his family came out. There's big searches, and they said, hey, if he's in here, we're going to see his snow tracks going out. And some people thought he fell in the lake and blah, blah, blah. And the next summer, 12 miles from where he was last seen at the park, 12 miles into the wilderness, some people were walking through the woods, and they step up onto this Douglas fir, and they see a skull cap, and they see some pants. And it's a pair of jeans that have no shoes on them at the bottom, but there's socks at the bottom of the jeans, and there's a broken tibia on the right leg, no other bones. The pants are unzipped and open, and there's little bones in the socks. And the people will see, okay, somebody died here, and this is bad, so they go back and they get the National Park Service. Now, any National Park police officer isn't going to say crap to me about this, but I found a guy, 30 years as a teacher in Medford, Oregon, and during the summer he was a national park police officer for 30 years. He'd move his family up there. And this man's name was Marion. And Marion, I interviewed him for an entire day about this case. And he went back there and he said, Dave, I've seen all kinds of dead bodies. And he said, first of all, that person should have had their shoes on. And we looked all over and we couldn't find their boots. And he goes, second of all, there's no way that 20-year-old young man made it 12 miles into the wilderness in the middle of winter. Impossible. I don't know how he got there, but that was him. And when my partner and I rode into that location, we knew something really, really, really unusual happened. We backed our way out, and we called for an FBI evidence response team from Portland. And they flew into the wilderness to process that scene. And he said, there was a lot of things about that case, and it was a big chapter in my book. And I Freedom of Information Act requested the reports from the FBI. And the first thing I get is a denial letter saying, no, because of the privacy of the family and for this man, we're not going to give you any reports. And I had to remind him very politely, the man was dead. His mom and his dad are dead, and he had no sister or brother. No privacy issues. So they send me 3 pages, 99% redacted. There was a few thes and a's. Now, what did they find there that they don't want me to see?
Yeah. Why would they redact any?
Exactly.
Right. David, what about these, like, I know they found kids where they found the remains, but yet the shoes look like they're brand new, just freshly washed with no mud or cuts, or shoelaces are perfect.
Well, the best case of that was the Atadero case in Colorado. He was missing for 4 years, and, snow in the area where he was gets 10, 20 feet deep, and the shoes look like they were brand new, like they were just placed there. Very, very strange. Well, and one of the other profile points that I didn't cover with you is that the victim is found in an area that was previously searched. Now, what I mean by that is that, let's say you and I are given this grid to search, and we go out, and over 6 days, we search that same grid 3 times. 2 weeks later, after the search is over, some hiker goes through there in that same grid, and they find the body. This is not, and let me make this really clear, an indictment on the search and rescue people. And the reason I say that is because they use canines to go through the same area. They've had many, many people go through that area, and then all of a sudden, the person's found in an area that was previously searched. The best example of that is a young boy disappeared from this one woodsy area, and the searchers all took the same trail every day out to search the area where he disappeared. The last day of the search, on their way out, there's a tree that fell over their trail, and the boy is laying on top of the tree, deceased.
Like in plain view, you couldn't have missed it. It's a
So basically, you're saying these bodies or people or objects like shoes are being placed. They're being placed well after the fact.
I don't think when you talk to the search and rescue people, they can believe it. They don't. They, in their mind, did not miss those people.
No, yeah, I agree. There'd be no way to.
Well, really quick question. You talked about the young guy that went 12 miles in the wilderness. Just for using that as an example, have you ever had anybody try to recreate that trek just to see if things were possible?
Good question. So the first movie I made was called Just Missing 411. And you can watch that on YouTube right now for free. And that starred Survivor man Les Stroud. Now, Les and I did some work together, and he goes, "Hey, Dave, if I can ever help you, let me know." And he goes, "Give me some of those books. I want to read them." And then after he read them, he gives me a call. He goes, "Hey, you and I have to do something together. These books are great." He goes, "There's something weird going on." And I go, "Well, hey, I'm making a movie, and I've got a case in Oregon where a young boy disappeared in the afternoon. Most common time to disappear, by the way, is between...
Are you looking to accelerate your career? Accelerate with Spreetail. We're one of the fastest growing e-commerce companies in the U.S. Spreetail partners with your favorite e-commerce marketplaces and brands to get customers what they want fast. Next day delivery fast. At Spreetail, you'll enjoy the growth that comes with tackling new, ambitious challenges with a team that supports your goals and invests in your development. Are you ready to take on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Learn more and apply today at wearespreetail.com.
4 and 4:30 in the afternoon. Well, this boy was with his brother and sister. His mom calls him for lunch, and lunch at about 2:30 or 3, and the boy disappears. Giant search, they're not finding him. And they find him the next morning after 12 hours, 9 miles away and over 2 mountain ranges, and he's 2 years old.
No way.
Now, I've had kids. Doug, you've had kids.
Yeah.
I don't think my kid's not that good. They couldn't cover 2 mountain ranges and that many miles in that much time. I'm sorry.
That's simply impossible.
And one thing Les tells me on film is, he said, Dave, you got to remember something. That might be 9 air miles, but nobody walks 9 air miles in the woods. 9 air miles could be 12 or 15 miles easily.
To me, I'm thinking more like threefold from air miles.
Yeah. So in this case, we're going to reenact it with Les. And Les comes out, and we're in this area, and we know where the boy disappeared when he was found. And we start at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And at about 12:30 or 1, Les stops and goes, Dave, we're stopping this right here. He goes, I'm going to walk off a cliff. I'm going to kill myself and kill the crew. And there's no way this boy did this. He goes, if it was my kid, Les had a son. Les has a great son. And I had a son. And Doug, you have a son.
Yes.
At 2 years old, at nighttime, my son's going to lay down and go to sleep. Yeah. And that's what Les reminded me of. I go, you know what? You're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. He's not going to.
Yeah, I got a 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old son, and he would exactly do that.
Yeah.
Lay down.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be too scared to walk anywhere. One.
Yeah.
They're going to be too cold. They're going to be too, they're going to cry. They're going to curl up and cry.
Yep.
Yeah, for a little kid to go over 2 mountain ranges, forget it. It's literally impossible.
Yep.
Well, then you take a geographic area like Minnesota. You try to walk in a straight line. I mean, you're constantly hitting swamps, lakes, ponds. You got to go around all these trees and bushes and logs, and you're just it's back and forth. So it could even be in certain geographic areas 5 times the distance.
Yep. No, I agree with you. Kind of the end of that was, and I used Les for this reason, to let people understand the impossibility of these distances. And not only were young kids traveling these phenomenal distances, they were also being found at phenomenal heights above where they were last seen in elevation. Like a 2-year-old disappearing at one elevation and then a couple miles away being found 3,000 or 4,000 feet higher than where they disappeared. And when you ask parents, well, if your son was lost, would they go uphill or downhill, or what would they do? I think most of us know the answer to that.
Once in a while, there's a happy ending. I'm sure you know the case of I think he was 3 or 4. He was found in some briar bushes at a pretty high elevation. And the little kid, I guess he said a bear took care of him. But there's no way. I mean, it was below freezing at night. He did not have hypothermia. He was in really good shape. And his only story was that a bear had taken care of him.
Yeah, wasn't that North or South Carolina?
Yeah, it was somewhere. And I don't know all the facts, but I just remember going, God, is this something not right with that story?
And I've never known a bear to be wanting to take care of anybody.
Yeah, but
other than get away from us.
Yeah, the fact that the kid did not die from exposure is a miracle. I mean, so it was a happy ending. But
so there's
just
along those same lines, Doug. In these books, I've written about a series of stories, and I put them on my YouTube channel where I've gone to the scene here in Montana at times to show where these kids have disappeared. If you go to Can-Am Missing Project, YouTube, you'll see that I have like 60 videos where I've gone out and I've talked about this. Wow. And you'll be surprised how many cases where people said a bear took a child and kept them warm at night, or there's another story I did on my channel where a wolf took a little girl and kept her comforted during the night. Hard to believe.
That is very hard to believe because, I mean, that's interspecies, and you wouldn't think that they'd have any interest in taking care of a human being, but stranger things, I guess, have happened. When they find, like, the child 2 mountain ranges away, what's the explanation from the authorities once that baby's found, once that child is found, to the families?
So you got to understand the mentality of this, guys. So, first of all, 95% of all search and rescue is done by volunteers. Mm-hmm. Really, the commander of the search and rescue team, maybe as a deputy sheriff, is a full-time law enforcement person. But all the search and rescue is really done by people like you and me who go out and get certifications on our own and practice with search and rescue and volunteer your time. And therein lies one of the reasons that most search and rescues don't go past 7 days, because it's hard for you and me to take 7 days or more off of work and continue searching when we've got a family to feed and work to go to. And we're not getting any compensation for doing this. So when the people are found, it's like this joyous thing inside the search and rescue. They're not trained to think criminal. They're not trained to think anything other than, we've got the party, let's give them first aid, let's take care of them, and let's get out of here.
I suppose leave that for law enforcement to figure out the whys.
Oh, and they won't.
Yeah.
They really want nothing to do with this topic because it takes you down a road where there are no answers. Mm-hmm. And with law enforcement specifically, they don't like to make comments about things that they can't give a direct answer to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, come to think of it, it's very rarely when you do hear of a case such as that, it just simply states where the person was found in what state, you know, dead or alive, and it doesn't go into any detail beyond that. And then you hear nothing about it after that.
There was a case that he did not go missing, but it could possibly kind of link up in some weird way. He was walking on a hiking trail in a state park. All that happened to him. Just picture this 6-foot-tall guy. He gets shoved downwards out of nowhere. Never saw what shoved him, but he was shoved down so hard that he broke bones in his face. And, I mean, he looked terrible. I saw photos of him. Never saw what hit him. But to shove a man downwards would take amazing strength and tight, with that kind of force. Did you ever hear about that, David?
No, never heard of it.
Well, I'll send you a link. Because it's not a missing person, but
right.
I found it interesting.
So let me take you guys back to Yosemite before we lose this track of thought here. So because there's over 50 people missing in Yosemite and more around the area, this past year, we decided as a film team that our third film was going to be about people in missing national parks. And we signed up to film in several national parks, different missing person cases. Now, obviously, the main focus of it would be Yosemite. And to film in Yosemite, you need to make reservations at hotels, motels a year in advance because they fill up so quick. Mm-hmm. And you need to file your film permit. You got to have liability insurance. You got to give them a detailed dossier of where you're going, what you're doing, who the people are, their names. It's extensive. So I filled all this out, gave them our fee, got the liability insurance, which is expensive, and made our reservations. I don't hear anything. And I email them. I don't hear anything. Now, we're getting to this point where I'm going to lose the reservations or I'm going to lose thousands of dollars because I'm not canceling them. And then this is like in about March, April. I'm still not hearing anything. And our reservation was for the week before Memorial Day. And I'm not getting anything. And finally, I get something from them after I probably put down maybe 15 or 20 emails to them. And I'll read to you what I got from the Special Permits Unit. And I put this on our website because I want people to understand what we're up against. It says, I can tell you what we have been doing for the last month, managing the park emergency closure and staff stay-at-home orders due to COVID-19. Your novelty film project was not a priority of the National Park Service. I believe our website indicates there is a 30-day process on film applications. I'll also inform you, filming permits are a privilege granted entirely at the discretion of the park superintendent and park management and not a right. Let's be clear on that. We'll review a revised filming location request based on your application with no staff interviews. I'll stop there for a second. Part of our request was we wanted to interview several of their staff members about disappearances. Get back to the letter. And get back to you on any revisions we require. We'll need to review the revised filming proposal and cannot commit to any dates at this time as the park remains closed. All public access. However, the phased reopening will occur and we'll let you know then. Unless you are flexible and work according to our schedule, I strongly suggest you look elsewhere to film. His name was Joe Llewellyn, Chief of Land Resources and Special Park Uses. Now, good gentlemen, to call my project a novelty film project and to tell me that we have to be at the discretion of the superintendent and park management and we don't have a right as a First Amendment issue to tell the stories of missing people on public property? What do you guys think of that?
They don't want you poking around.
Yeah.
There's something. There's a big cover-up going on.
You know, I still find it hard to believe it would be motivated by money, David.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure the Park Service takes in a lot of money, but these people don't care. They don't care how much money is taken in by the Park Service. You know what I mean? There's a cover-up, no doubt, for some other reason. Don't you agree?
So I showed this to, there's a whole bunch of park rangers and supervisors and things that used to work for the Park Service that I talk to regularly. And they know what I'm up against and they hate it. And I showed them this letter and they said, Dave, first of all, I can't believe that this guy signed a name to this thing because it's completely abusive. And they said he had to have had the approval from people way up in the Park Service to let that go, knowing the ramifications of writing something like that. And because, gentlemen, we were going to that park after we had already interviewed victims' families that had disappeared in the park. And this person writes this to me.
Which is shocking as all.
It really is.
The balls to, like you said, to sign a name to that letter and just come out and trample all over your rights is mind-boggling.
If people want to read the letter, it's on our website, canammissing.com, under current events. I just posted it there. You can go ahead and read it yourself. But it not only offended me, it got me really, really mad. And I'm still mad when I read it again.
I'd be fired up too, because like I said, they trampled right all over. And also, as a taxpayer, you have a right to be in that park.
What they don't realize, David, is they are motivating you more.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of motivation there. And, you know, how we're going to go about this, you know, whether we're going to take these victims' families and give them on a news broadcast and then let them read this on the air, what Mr. Llewellyn said. I don't think that when you see the families of these victims that have no answers and they're looking to the Park Service as the authority to help them get the answers and get closure, and this is the response.
David, how does Canada approach this problem? Because clearly they have to have missing people in Canada. because you wrote a couple.
Oh God, yes.
Let's see. Last year you wrote 411 Canada. Is it a way different approach?
Missing 411 Canada. That book surprised me when I took it on because the focus of it. I covered cases from all the different provinces, but really the majority of the cases happen in British Columbia, and the majority of those happen probably within 80 to 100 miles of Vancouver. And within 80 to 100 miles of Vancouver, there's some of the most gorgeous mountains, but there's some strange disappearances that have happened there. In the thousands of cases I've reviewed, I've never heard of a missing person being found headless, except in British Columbia.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's hard. It's hard to take a head off a body. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Isn't British Columbia, the weather, excuse me, it's more mild than, let's say, Northern Ontario because it's, a little closer to the ocean. The weather is more mild there, correct?
You know what, actually, Doug, I would say it's in parts, it's almost tropical. They get so much rain and it's so lush.
Yeah. Mm. So it's not
the
weather.
Head missing.
It's not weather.
What's in your best guesstimation separated this individual from their head?
I honestly have no clue. I think a coroner could probably figure it out, but I'm not. If they did figure it out and it was suspicious, I don't think we'd ever know about it, and they'd never see the time of day.
Yeah, there's no way that you can get coroner reports. That's correct, right?
Yeah. A family can get them, and sometimes they can release them. In some states, there's mandatory disclosure on some things, but not all things, and every state and every county is different.
It's kind of like the ace in the hole to keep things away from you if they choose to do so, kind of thing going on. When it's if they chose to do such a thing, like I'm sure that there are a lot of strange deaths that obviously the coroner looks at and then never gets released. But David, I got to ask you: does anyone ever go missing like for long periods of time and then just kind of walks out of the woods and there they are, they're back?
Oh God, yeah. No, there's some really famous cases about people who have survived against insurmountable odds and have come out alive. And there's sometimes there's no rhyme or reason why they lived or how they lived, and they do, and it's a godsend, but not the norm, I would say. I mean, and I think it depends on the area that you go missing in, and if there's enough water, that's probably the biggest thing. You can go without food for 10, 14, sometimes 15 to 20 days, but you really can't go without water more than a few days.
Yeah, isn't the rule of 3?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but the more you talk, the more questions I have, and especially some of these cases that you've discussed with us tonight. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show to discuss these with us. It almost, I want to say, David, I can't help myself, cover up, man. I mean, we've already established there's a cover up, but one clear thing we're not getting to is why. I mean, obviously they don't want to scare people, number one. Maybe I'm hitting on it myself here. They don't want to scare the public. They don't want to see a dip in revenue. But why not be honest with people so they can take their own safety seriously?
So when Doug was doing MonsterQuest, he interacted with a lot of government agencies to get permits and to talk to them and work with them, etc. I bet he'll agree with this. I think that the government will never admit to anything that they can't control and can't dominate.
Yeah, that could be one of the reasons. I mean, God, I can remember one time we were filming and to see the BLM caravans of trucks coming out to see what we're doing over and over again. It was kind of like, what? This is a huge waste of government resources. We weren't even on BLM land. We were near it, but we were not on it. And they just kept coming and coming and coming. So, yeah, no, I get what you're up against, and you just kind of wonder, what is going on? What do they know that we don't know?
One thing I wanted to get on here before I forget is if people look for my books on Amazon, they're going to see the prices between $75 and $100. I don't sell on Amazon. Our books are $24.99 on our website, so I don't want people getting mad at me if they accidentally go to Amazon to look at the ratings or something. Please do that, but don't buy there. CanAmMissing.com is our website.
Definitely go over there, guys, and get these books because they are extraordinary.
Yeah, they really are. I made the mistake one time, David, of asking my children what they wanted for Christmas, and both of them independently asked for the Missing 411 book series.
I've always said you had good, sharp kids, Doug.
They were interested. It's just totally shocked me that there's so much interest, in this, from young people, old people, everybody. Did you ever, was there ever a point where you went, this is, a viable thing to do, not only because it needs to be done, but because there's people that want to read about this?
You know what really sincerely and honestly motivates me is that when you meet the families of the victims and you realize nobody is helping them, nobody cares, they don't know where to turn for help, and these are people just like you and me who are never ever thought in their lives they'd be in this position, and now all of a sudden they're looking for anybody to help them.
Yeah.
How could I not do something to help these people?
That's so true. You got it. You're right. Somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to help, David. And if it's not going to be government, it has to be somebody. And you're filling that void.
Yeah. Yeah, I really commend you, David, for just noticing. Just noticing. It's amazing.
And everybody go to his website, get his books. I guess the main thing I'd like everyone that's listening to take away from this is be careful out there. Be careful. Take this to heart. Understand this happens to thousands of people. You don't want to be one of those people. You don't want to make it one of his books. You don't want to make it David's one of his books. Definitely you don't want to.
If you're going to go on a hike, tell somebody where you're going. Tell them when you're going to be back. Text them when you're going to be back. And tell them, if you don't get a text from me, you're calling search and rescue. Always hike in pairs. Get a personal locator beacon. And if you're a mom, a dad, get one for your son or daughter if they're doing this, because it'll save their life.
Absolutely. And always use your best common sense as well. Till next time, guys, take care of each other. Love each other. David, again, thank you for coming on so much. Thank you to everybody that's sitting in and listening to this show. We couldn't do it without you guys. Until next time.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy killed 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series, John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now, only on Peacock.